This was an unbelievable opportunity for the country to come together and pay homage to the service and the sacrifice of the U.S. Army. Unfortunately, CNN didn't think it was worth covering, though. They wanted to cover a bunch of other rallies and people talking about kings, which is pretty spectacular that that's how bad things have gotten, that they can't even just stop. It was interesting. Even John Fetterman, of all people, put out a tweet recognizing this. He said, "This parade is compromised our sons, our daughters, mothers, and fathers, the very best of us. Regardless of your politics, it's appropriate to celebrate the 250 years of sacrifice and dedication and service." That's what this was about. For all of the talk about kings and Trump's birthday, he didn't talk about that. Former Washington Post and CNNer Chris Cillizza had to admit it. He put out a tweet. He said that I've never heard Trump give such a short speech. For the people who said this would be all about Trump, it's been 95% celebrating the Army, 5% celebrating Trump. All right, guys, good Monday to you. What a weekend. What a weekend. And this is going to be a crazy week. The president landed in Canada, beginning the G7. And by the way, speaking of landing, you remember 10 years ago today, he came down that escalator at Trump Tower to begin what became an unbelievable political journey that a lot of people dismissed. A lot of people said he wasn't going anywhere. I always remind people there's this big style section, Washington, D.C. I'll put it up, the front page that says the outside guy's inside man. It's like, when were you with Trump? I was the guy that was getting crapped on for being with Trump that early, just to give you a sense when everyone else said he couldn't win. But, you know, I'm a believer that he deserved a lot of respect and credit for throwing his hat into the ring. And anyway, but what a weekend. What a weekend. Ton of activity this weekend. I want to get into that because I think it portends a lot. We're headed towards the 250th anniversary of our country next year. The 4th of July is coming up. And so I think a lot about last weekend is important to understand as we head forward, how the Dems, how the left, how the media will treat it. By the way, two amazing guests coming your way. Raheem Kassam, you may remember him. He was a leader in the Brexit movement. He worked for Nigel Farage. He's the editor of the National Pulse and the proprietor. He's a close friend of Stephen K. Bannon on the War Room all the time. And he owns a new restaurant called Butterworths on Capitol Hill. I'll get into that. And then John Reid is the lieutenant governor nominee in Virginia. There are two states up this year, Virginia and New Jersey. And Republicans control, believe it or not, all of the 3 statewide offices in Virginia and none of them in New Jersey. It's going to be a really interesting year. So we'll get into that. And tomorrow, by the way, Seth Keshel. All right, let me get into this weekend. This was an unbelievable opportunity for the country to come together and pay homage to the service and the sacrifice of the U.S. Army. It was unbelievable. The end, by the way, was so patriotic. I posted the clips on my social media if you want to see the whole thing. But the fireworks, the coordination with the Army band, it was just moving. I found it unbelievably patriotic how they handled this. Kudos to the Army. Hey, Navy, your turn's coming up in a few months in Philadelphia. Better step it up. They did a really good job. I think the America 250 Committee, the Army, SecDef, the Department of Defense, kudos to you guys. Unfortunately, CNN didn't think it was worth covering, though. They wanted to cover a bunch of other rallies and people talking about kings, which is pretty spectacular that that's how bad things have gotten, that they can't even just stop. It was interesting. Even John Fetterman, of all people, put out a tweet recognizing this. He said, "This parade is compromised our sons, our daughters, mothers, and fathers, the very best of us. Regardless of your politics, it's appropriate to celebrate the 250 years of sacrifice and dedication and service." That's what this was about. That's what this is about. For all of the talk about kings and Trump's birthday, he didn't talk about that. The only people talking about Trump and kings were the left and their folks in the media. Former Washington Post and CNNer Chris Cillizza had to admit it. He put out a tweet. He said that I've never heard Trump give such a short speech. For the people who said this would be all about Trump, it's been 95% celebrating the Army, 5% celebrating Trump. I think that's actually generous. I think it was 99% Army. The only time it was about Trump was when other people made it about Trump. They said happy birthday to them, etc. But that wasn't about him making it about him. And by the way, I tweeted back at Chris and I said the people that he's referring to were the people in the media and the left wing. They were wrong. This wasn't about Trump. He didn't make it about him. I mean, talk about kings, by the way. What about when Biden opened the border? What about when Biden defied the Supreme Court on student loans? That's a king, isn't it? Same definition. What has Trump done? He's tried to enact his agenda, but he's followed the court. He's done what they've said. They just don't like it because it's him. On the same day that we did this, thousands of people went to the streets of America waving another country's flag. Think about that for a minute. And I got to thinking about it. Well, what are these people protesting? What is it that they really want? Well, Fox went out on the street and asked. Take a look.
I'm just so scared. I'm 74 years old. I worry about everything. And I just am so scared.
You're so scared. Oh, boo-hoo. Scared of what? Well, there's another guy, he goes by Alfredo Pastadon on the internet. He actually asked them to be a little bit more specific about what they were protesting. Here's what they said. What are they scared of?
Excuse me. What are we protesting today?
Donald Trump.
What's Donald Trump doing that we're protesting?
Well, he is f***ing up the American democracy right now and trying to kind of repeal a bunch of shit in the Constitution, like, rights and liberties. So,
is there anything in specific that he's...
I don't have all the information, but I do know.
What are you against?
Personally, I'm against tyrants. I'm against tyranny. That's what I'm against.
All right. I don't have specifics. I'm just giving up my weekend, hanging out here holding a sign. This is no tyrants, but I can't tell you why. These are the people on the left. This is how they spend their weekend. I got a ton of stuff to do. If they want to come over and help me clean out a shed or my basement, come on. But if you're that desperate in life that that's how you spend your weekend, carrying a sign, not knowing what you're supposed to be doing or why, then you got a problem, son. It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And by the way, I know it didn't go reported, but one of the folks in Utah shot another person. That's right. Left on left. Blue on blue. No media coverage because that doesn't fit their narrative, does it? There was also a big attack out in Minnesota. Pretty sad. These Democratic legislatures being attacked. The media rushed. They wanted to make this all about abortion. But the guy had literally a flyer in his car that said no kings. The Minnesota state law enforcement asked people not to go out and protest because they were worried that much about it. They don't want to tell you that, do they? They don't want to tell you that Tim Walz appointed that guy to the Workforce Development Board in Minnesota because that doesn't go with the narrative. It was unbelievable how shameful and pathetic the media was this weekend. And oh, by the way, according to a new Rasmussen report, the majority of Americans actually support what President Trump's doing on deportations. Again, they don't want to tell you that. It's just unbelievable. Anyway, as I mentioned, a great show coming up your way. Raheem Kassam from the National Pulse, Steve Bannon's War Room, all coming up. And then John Reid, the Republican nominee for Lieutenant Governor in Virginia. We had a great weekend rant. Take a quick look. For all the talk about what's happening in L.A., do you realize that it started with a Democratic assemblyman out there in California? His name is Jose Luis Solchari Jr., and he started filming ICE agents going to work. He started live streaming them, saying that something must be going on because he said he felt nervous and afraid, and he wanted people to come gather and join him. He incited this. They're waving the Mexican flag. They're chanting F ICE. If you love this country and you want to be here and you don't want to be deported, why are you waving the flag of another country? It doesn't make sense. All right. And by the way, tomorrow, Seth Keshler is going to be coming on, talk about the latest in voter registration, and especially with respect to Virginia and New Jersey, plus the midterms. We got a lot to break down from him. Before I bring in Raheem, though, I got to tell you, there's one great guy that doesn't get enough due. His name is Leo Grillo. If you've watched the show for a while, you know that Leo's been with us for a long time. He's doing great work. It all started with one Doberman that he rescued on the side of the road named Delta, that he named Delta, dedication, everlasting love to animals. And then it spawned the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. Go to deltarescue.org to see exactly what I'm talking about. Horses, cats, dogs, you name it, animals of all sizes and stripes. If they've been abused, abandoned, malnutrition, Leo Grillo takes them in. I love what this guy's doing. And I've gotten to know Leo on a personal level. I just love it. I've made a personal donation. I'm an animal lover. I've rescued 3 dogs. I get it. And what he does, it's not a shelter. They're not looking to adopt these animals. He wants to take care of them for life, to make sure they get the care they need. Do me a huge favor. Check out deltarescue.org. Please make a personal contribution because there's no government contracts that is helping Leo Grillo. This is all me and you. I made a personal contribution because I believe in what Leo's doing at Delta Rescue. Go to deltarescue.org to do that. Join me in making a personal contribution. Also, take a look at that estate planning kit. There might be an old 401k or a tax benefit that you could have because you own something. Talk to your tax planner, but go to deltarescue.org to talk see what I'm talking about. All right, before we get to Raheem, one more thing. I got a great night's sleep. I'm ripper-roaring it, ready to go this week because I took my Delta, my Delta rescue. Didn't take my Delta. I took my Beam Dream Powder last night. I have one more scoop, by the way, of the brownie. Then I'm back on the cocoa cinnamon. It is amazing. It's got all the natural ingredients that I've used to take in a pill at one point or other: melatonin, magnesium, reishi, apigenin, L-theanine, in an amazing blend. And last night, like I said, I have one more scoop of the brownie ready to go. I did it last night for about 40 seconds in the microwave. I put a scoop together. I drink it down. I'm not kidding, guys, when I say I get out of bed if I've forgotten. It's that important to my night's sleep. And if you're on a wellness journey or just you cannot do anything without a great night's sleep. I literally fall asleep 30 minutes after I take this, wake up, rip over, and to go. It's science-backed. It's in a great flavor. I'm not kidding when I tell you this. I can't live without this stuff. My focus is better. I'm excited every day, and my Beam is giving all of you guys the ultimate Patriot discount, 40% off. You cannot get a deal like that anywhere else. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer and use code Spicer for 40% off any of the flavors. Shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer for 40% off any of those flavors. It's a great American company that will get you back on the path to wellness and feeling great. All right, without further ado, I'm excited to bring in our first guest. He's the editor of the National Pulse, the host and proprietor over there at Butterworths on Capitol Hill, and a co-founder of the War Room with Steve Bannon. Rick, welcome in Raheem Kassam. Hey, Raheem, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So before we get going, I want to talk to you a little bit about how this weekend went down. I was very disappointed as an American how the left and the media covered it. But it sounds like your place, Butterworth, was the place to be after the parade. I was not in town for it, but I kept getting texts, "Are you going to Butterworth? Are you going to Butterworth?" And I was like, I'm not in town, but apparently that is the place to be.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I hate to say it in these terms, but I haven't seen such a crowd. I was walking around downtown. I haven't seen such a crowd in town since that fateful day, right? The day that the Constitution was overturned and America turned into a dictatorship. That was right. That was January 6, 2021. When I walked downtown that day as well. But it was a very different kind of vibe, a very different kind of outcome. And I'm sure the left would have wanted it to turn nasty and violent. A lot of them did across the country, in fact. There was a lot of violence, aimed especially in Minnesota, as we know, across the weekend as well. And this is kind of what they've reverted to now. Everybody I saw downtown in Washington, D.C. was upbeat, excited, really wanted to be there, really wanted to see the best of the U.S. Army on its 250th birthday. And then you had these kind of corner of whiny people, very, very clearly unwashed, with little signs that said, no kings, no kings. And you just think, and especially with my accent and being for where I am, I'm like, well, they actually kind of already have something that commemorates that. It's July the 4th, and they've been doing it for quite a while and rubbing it in my face as well. So for the left to be coming out with this sort of stuff now, it was a bit sad. And I think also some of the media coverage, yeah, all right, look, I expect the NBCs and the CNNs to do what they do. But actually, I think the right media spent too much time making excuses this weekend for what it was, talking about recruitment levels and all this stuff. Why can't we just say that we want to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Army, and it so happens to fall on President Trump's birthday? Is that a problem?
No, and I got to be honest, I'm with you on this. Why were we ashamed of it? I feel like all the media coverage said like Trump's parade, which it wasn't, or, we haven't seen a parade like this since 1991. And my answer was, yeah, but the Army's never celebrated its 250th birthday. That's like saying we've never seen your 40th birthday party before. No kidding, because you only turn it once. So we will never see another 250th birthday party for the Army or anniversary because they only have it once. And the idea that America couldn't come together and say, yeah, hey, guess what? 1 million Americans have died in service to the Army. To be honest with you, if you really don't like Trump, then the more you made it about the Army, that would have been the right answer.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's sort of a precursor, right, Sean, to next year, which
is it.
Right, which is the nation's 250th anniversary. And on the run-up to the last election, just obviously the immigration situation, obviously the economic situation, all sorts of other things. But I said to my friends, I said, one of the most important things for me as a reason why Trump needs to win is you can't have the left running the 250th anniversary celebrations. It would be diabolical. I mean, quite actually diabolical. You can imagine what the imagery would have looked like. They had, during the Biden, I nearly said administration, during the Biden regime, they had all of these things lined up ready to go for what America 250 would look like under the left. Most people didn't see it coming together, but the people who were on the board of that organization at the time were people who would have been quite happily flying basically any other flag of any other nation, of any other interest group than Old Glory. And I'm just so satisfied that on the run up to this, on the run up to the World Cup, as we have as well coming up next year, that there is a patriotic lover of this country and what it stands for in the Oval Office.
I love President Trump brings this up all the time, and you just touched on it. The irony of the Democrats, what they did was all of this stuff, the new Air Force One, the FIFA World Cup Championship, the 250th anniversary of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the country, all would have happened if Trump had gone back-to-back consecutive terms under somebody else. But because of what they did, it's now Kim that gets to do all this. And there is such an irony that it is Trump that gets to do this. And you're right. I looked at who this whole thing about Trump's parade. If you actually go look, it was part of America 250, the commission and the committee that sets this up. You're right about the appointees. Go look it up. These people, they all thought they were going to be celebrating somebody else in office, not Donald Trump. But there is an irony that all of this is now going to happen under Donald Trump's watch.
Yeah, that's right. And we are so ready for it. You mentioned Butterworths, our restaurant on Capitol Hill at the beginning, and I've already started to plan special menus for the occasion, to purchase decorations for the occasion. I mean, we're a year out, but I'm super excited about it because I just think I'm a particularly unpleasant person when it comes to my political enemies. I hope you would agree. I'm perfectly pleasant when I'm entertaining at the restaurant. But when I love to twist the knife into the political left, because God knows they've done it to us for long enough. And so I just cannot wait. The reason I love standing out there outside the restaurant every night and puffing our chests out and being like, hey, we're here. We're not going anywhere. This, we are not just here for a couple of years to try and tinker around the edges anymore. We are going to fundamentally change the way that this city operates and how it operates for the wider American public. And indeed, honestly, for everybody around the world, quite frankly. You take what's happened in Iran just over the last couple of days as prime example of that. How many presidents, how many special advisors have wanted a prolonged and or nuclear conflict with Iran? And of course, the deal maker himself comes back into town and goes, all right, we're going to make a deal. You don't want to make a deal? The Israelis are going to kick your butt. You want to make a deal now? Suddenly they want to make a deal now.
All right, I want to get to Iran in a second, but before I do, let me just talk about the restaurant for a second, because I'm actually intrigued. You guys hosted, not you, but Steve Bannon and Matt Boyle of Breitbart had this really, I assume, epic conversation with John Fetterman the other day. You guys posted about it. Last night, you were at the Kennedy Center. I saw on your social media that you guys posted this advertisement for Butterworths that said, hey, bring your stub, your ticket stub, and we can, what is it that you want out of this restaurant? You don't want just a safe space for conservatives, right?
No, not at all. In fact, I think the idea of ghettoizing oneself is remarkably lame. I actually am somebody who loves to march into opposition territory and as I say again, sort of pound my chest and give an open challenge to people. Some people call it arrogance, Sean. I think I am smarter, more cultured than them. I love the fact that they cling on to these terrible restaurants in DC and they think they're the height of sophistication. And I actually wanted to show them that not only can people who identify on the political right own and operate a space that is fundamentally cool. And you know that because, hey, even the New York Times Magazine has had to accept it. Even the Washington Post food review section has had to accept it. And go through all of these things and show, hey, I don't care whether you're Nancy Pelosi, whether you're Stephen K. Bannon, whatever. If you want a good meal and good vibes, you can come to Butterworths. But more than that, I'm sick of playing defense at a cultural level. And, my father was in restaurants growing up, in hospitality, in hotels. And I just thought, hey, maybe it runs in the blood. We actually rolled the dice on this stuff before the election. We started to build out last January. So whatever would have happened, we would have opened. It just so happens that the MAGA train came to town, thank God. And we have a captive audience of people who want to come there every night, drink excellent martinis as a hat tip to our bar staff, eat excellent French inspired cuisine, and meet people. And they don't care if they're meeting somebody on the left or the right. They're actually there to partake in something that has been long lost in my home country. In the United Kingdom, a pub closes every day, and we say every pub's a parliament. These places, these communal spaces, are where you go to hash out the issues of the day instead of picking up your phone and raging against somebody on some social media platform. And so that's the kind of space we wanted to build. If you want to talk politics, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. And that's and by the way, this is the first location.
Oh, big tease there. Okay. Is there going to be another one in D.C., or are you looking outside the Beltway?
I'm definitely looking outside. I think there are places around the country that need this sort of thing as well. There are lots of places, I think, in predominantly conservative areas that want a little bit more elevation to their dining. And I think you've probably seen the menu. We're not extortionate. We're not trying to rip anybody off. People don't really get into the restaurant business to make money. This is a cultural play, and so anything I can do to help, we're going to be there with bells on. Maybe the next one is New York. Maybe it's Palm Beach. We're still assessing.
See, I was guessing Palm Beach. I know you've got Palm Beach written all over you. You've got a level of sophistication and culture that says, I don't want to be in D.C. when it's cold. I want to go to Palm Beach.
You might be right.
All right, let's get back to bigger issues. Here is the thing that's interesting to me about what's going on with Iran. There is, beyond the tactics and the strategy, the media is sort of making this seem like a massive divide among the MAGA faithful, saying that you've got the Marjorie Taylor Greens siding with on one side, the Tucker Carlsons on another. Where do you come down on Iran? Like, what should the U.S. play be right now?
So, not to sound preachy, but this is the problem with our 24-hour news cycle, is that everybody is forced to have an opinion immediately rather than being able to wait and see and actually figure out what is going on and hear from all sides on this. I don't mean hear from the Iranian side. I mean hear from the Hawks or the Doves here in Washington D.C. And so well, some of your viewers who may not be familiar with me might be thinking to themselves, why is he asking a restaurateur about foreign policy?
Well,
but I actually worked in foreign policy. It was my first job. I did it for 10 years as a practitioner on both sides of the Atlantic at think tanks and consulting governments. Iran was obviously one of the major things there. And I have to tell you, looking at all of the arguments on both sides of this thing, and I tend to fall into the dovish camp. I'm a bit of a peacenik, a bit of a hippie, and I was a neocon back when being a neocon was the thing to do in my late teens. But we kind of pay our penitence and look at the world as it is today and go, right, we know we have these problems. We have to be foreign policy realists. Iran and China, they are malign actors and they do want to end American and Western hegemony. At the same time, nobody wants to get drawn into another long war. And along comes Donald Trump and threads the needle between those two camps, right? Between the camp of John Bolton, let's immediately go to war, let's nuke them, to damn the consequences, versus your most fearful peaceniks on the other side, perhaps Tucker Carlson or whatever it is, and Donald Trump comes along and threads the needle to the point where American troops and American resources are not being used to bring Iran back to the negotiating table, and B, you're talking about a 2 or 3 day intensive campaign, and guess what? This very morning, the Iranians say, actually, we're coming back to the negotiating table. I want people to understand just how extraordinary that is and how hard that is to achieve as the leader of the free world, to move all of those pieces around the chessboard and end up where you are within a couple of days is almost unheard of. And I am fully appreciative of President Trump's faults and flaws, as he is, but this is where he really shines.
So I agree with you. I don't think there's anybody that can get a deal or bring people back to the table like Donald Trump writ large. However, in this case, what worries me is that I think Iran realizes exactly what we all see. One big buster bombing, bomb, and they're over. Their capabilities have been diminished. They've had the head of their organization taken out on the military side. So maybe they're a little worried and they say, okay, uncle, we'll come back to the table. I have a hard time, though, believing that these guys can be trusted at all. And they chant death to America, which is another thing going against them. So regardless of whether they come back to the table, is this a smart play?
Well, the people who were at the table a week ago are dead now. So it's new people coming to the table. No, seriously. I mean, seriously, there needs to be an addendum to the art of the deal, which is a chapter on if you find yourself opposed at the boardroom table, here's how to assassinate the people who are opposing you, right? Because that is effectively what he did. And whether or not you decide that is a moral tactic in any given moment, it's a tactic that has clearly worked. And it's a tactic that a lot of people have. I mean, I've said it for years. Instead of invading a country and trying to occupy and democracy build and all of these silly things that we ended up doing in the developing world for so long, how about you just off the people that are stopping you getting your way? And that's, by the way, that's the way the British Empire used to do it, and this looks to be the way that the Trump administration is doing it. Those people who a week ago were saying death to America, there is no way we're coming to the negotiating table, are not going to be at tomorrow's negotiating table. And whether that is in Oman, and we see that this week, or whether things are done remotely, I actually do think for the first time, especially speaking to people this weekend, practitioners in this area this weekend, I actually think there is the first time that people have felt like there is some hope to getting an actual nuclear deal, not an Obama-style nuclear deal, out of Iran. And that's because you've taken those malign actors away from the table and into the ground.
So, the interesting thing is I think I'm probably on the Raheem team on this, because I feel like the way the media is trying to juxtapose this position is that you're either on Team Tucker or you're on Team Mark Leavvin, right? So you either want to blow the crap out of them or you shouldn't ever talk to them. But I feel like, to your point, I look at America first, probably more the way you described it, which is we don't need to go in guns a-blazing with our troops every time there's a problem. There are other ways to get to achieve our national interest. That could be economic, that could be strategic, that don't necessarily require us jumping in full feet every time, and we can still get it. And the way that Trump is handling this now is Israel's kind of doing the dirty work. They're doing a bunch of the stuff. We might be helping them a little on the back end with the intel and some other things, but we're not involved day to day, and we're not making any sort of claims about reconstruction or having people in there to take over a regime like we do in Iraq.
Yeah, Sean, you probably run into lots of libertarians at conferences over the years, and they want to bend your ear about how America used to use letters of marque and reprisal in its early days to fight the pirates and so forth. And so it's almost a similar situation. The libertarians should be delighted, by the way, about this, because effectively what you've done is outsource the war to a third party. And then just to build on your point, if America first stopped at America's borders, then we wouldn't concern ourselves with the Panama Canal. We wouldn't concern ourselves with Greenland. We wouldn't concern ourselves with shipping lanes. We wouldn't concern ourselves with the Strait of Hormuz. These are critical passageways across the world that keep Western hegemony, cultural and political hegemony, and economic, obviously, high up the agenda. And so, again, if you are a believer in those things, if you are like I am, that West is best, then you defend it, but you don't have to do it at a cost of American treasure and blood.
I want to pivot, if I can, for one last thing, which is, you've seen this now from your leader in the Brexit movement. You've been involved in foreign policy for a long time, as you said. And you're now actually in a business where I don't know enough about the restaurant business to know what's affected by a tariff or not in terms of all the things that go into putting a restaurant together. But when you look at how the president is handling trade and tariffs as he's kicking off the G7 today in Canada, what do you think about how he's handling trade and tariffs?
Yeah, look, it absolutely has an impact. But as I say, I don't think anybody seriously gets into the restaurant industry to make a lot of money. They may
I would.
make some money, but it's not exactly a gigantic a business play unless you're Tillman Fertitta, which is kind of the outlier
Yeah,
there,
Tillman's
right?
done a very good job. Yes, yes.
Which is
Although I don't know that I mean, everything
Yeah.
that guy owns now, but that's a whole. He's in a league of his own.
Yeah, exactly, and a big fan of all of that. I am as well, by the way. But it impacts things if you don't plan ahead. It impacts things.
No. But I mean, do you like what the president, how he's approaching this?
Just coming around to that point, but we have to just make the point that we have to make many considerations, right, as a business, and people who run businesses know that, and that's why this stuff kind of works for me. Because if you are a responsible actor, if you are ahead of the curve on these things, then you actually are not likely to get slapped around by these things. I think. When all of this Elon and Trump stuff was going on a week or two ago, I said to a reporter, I said, we always forget that the person who made the largest impact on America's deficit is Dr. Peter Navarro. 16 billion came into the Treasury last month in tariff alone. And this was a guy that Elon was calling a moron, 6 weeks ago. And I think credit where it's due. The idea of an external revenue service is far more moral than the idea of an internal revenue service. The receipts on what's coming into the country has actually cut the deficit versus, the things we were told were going to cut the deficit in the last couple of months. Congress is still bickering about that. So if you want real-time effective management of the economy, even if you're just slicing bits off here and there to try and get that deficit down, then the tariffs and the trade has been a rip-roaring success already. I actually hope that America maintains that because number one, you go back to the country's founding, Alexander Hamilton's report on the subject of manufacturers made extremely and abundantly clear that if you are reliant on external nations, it's obvious now, right? But at the time, wasn't quite sure. Can we ship from France? Can we ship from Britain? If you're reliant on external people, you are always going to be in somebody else's pocket or in somebody else's due. And America cannot afford to be that way. And the world cannot afford America to be that way.
Yeah. Raheem Kassam, proprietor, or one of the proprietors of Butterworths on Capitol Hill, and the editor of the National Pulse. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Sean.
You bet. All right, great conversation with Raheem. Now, as I mentioned, tomorrow there's a primary in Virginia for the Democrats to choose their nominees in the race. The Republican nominee for lieutenant governor is a guy named John Reid. He joins us now. John Reid, good to see you. Are you excited to find out who your primary opponent will be?
It's a mystery, but, out of the 6 Democrats who are running, they're all kind of crazy leftist radicals. So I am very curious who the Democrats will pick. But I feel confident that once the voters actually see a reasonable, responsible Republican who's made a life of trying to be fair with people versus these social justice warriors that the Democrats keep fielding in Virginia and elsewhere, that it's going to be a clear choice and Republicans like me will do great.
You mentioned the 6 individuals that are running for the Democratic nod to be lieutenant governor in Virginia. In your case, does it matter who you run against? Will your strategy change?
Well, I don't know that the strategy changes. I'm still the same person, but yeah, it matters who's up there because we've got one person who's the former mayor of Richmond for 8 solid years. And of course, people outside of Virginia may not have heard that we haven't had potable drinking water on 2 different occasions this year, 2025, in the capital city of Virginia. And we find out that the reason for that is that mayor didn't actually take care of the pipes and the pumps that present potable water for people in the capital city. So, he's going to have to own bad decisions like that. Then you have a state senator who has been, one of the leaders of education in Virginia as things have begun to fail across the state and some of the radical pro-trans ideology issues that have cropped up, especially in Northern Virginia. And then I think the other person is a possibility is a former NFL football player who was on the city council in Virginia Beach, who staked out a position very hostile to police in 2020. So, there are different topics for each one of these candidates, and I intend to take them on because all 3 of the people who I think may get this nomination are pretty radical.
Okay, so a new poll came out over the weekend by a Republican firm, admittedly, but we've used them before. We've talked. I mean, they're a very reputable coefficient. And it's got Abigail Spanbauer, the former Congresswoman. She's up 3 currently over Winsome Sears, the nominee for governor of Virginia. You are the lieutenant governor nominee. You're up 2 against a generic Democrat. And then Jason Miyares, the current attorney general Republican, is tied with a generic Dem. So what does that tell you? I mean, I guess the question is, it's weird in my mind because the Dem Spanberger leads Winsome Sears by 3, but then you guys are all push. Do you think that's just because when respondents were given a choice, they didn't have an actual person?
I've been working hard. I mean, I think I'm up because every day I try to have at least 2 public events where people who didn't listen to my radio show for the last decade and don't remember me as a TV news anchor will get a chance to know me. And I think that's probably helped me. You know, my goal was to be the hardest working statewide candidate in the history of Virginia. And I will be honest with you, it's pretty exhausting, but it's paying off because people are learning about who I am. And, you know, I don't make a big deal out of the fact that I'm the first gay, I guess, openly gay statewide candidate, whatever it is. But a lot of other people are, and that worried some conservatives. So I've had to explain to the conservatives that I'm solid, you know, having worked for Ronald Reagan, worked for George Allen, been an advocate for President Trump for such a long period of time. You can count on me as a solid conservative. But I think it's also convincing some people who said they'd never vote for a Republican to give us a second look. And that's part of my goal between now and November, is to win over some voters who might have written us off in the past. Say, this is a different kind of candidate than what we've seen in the past.
So last cycle, Governor Glenn Youngkin won, and then Winsome Sears, the current lieutenant governor who's running for governor, I would argue, pulled over the finish line. No offense to, like, it's just sort of the top of the ticket, outperformed Terry McAuliffe, and then Jason Miyares won as well. So we had a trifecta in Virginia. Do you believe that as you run, that you need a unified Republican ticket, starting with Winsome Sears down and Jason Miyares as the attorney general with you in the middle? Or are you guys all going to run sort of your own campaigns?
Listen, it's always better to be unified. And for my part, I'm endorsing Winsome at all of my events. I'm endorsing Jason. You know, both of them used to come on my radio show, you know, pretty frequently. There's been a lot of upheaval in the party. Anybody who's been paying attention to the headlines knows that. But I'm a loyal Republican. I've stayed with the party. So, yeah, it would be great if everybody was, you know, holding hands. And I think after tomorrow, to be honest with you, once it's very clear who the Democrats are putting up in the 2nd and 3rd slot, lieutenant governor and attorney general, and people realize how bad it could get if the Democrats do somehow pull off a win, I think anybody who's holding out or, you know, has concerns, they're going to say, hey, I'm putting those aside. I'm going with these guys.
And I'm just trying to read between the lines of what you're saying. Is there a sense that the Republicans aren't unified right now?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, Sean. I haven't talked much to the other folks on the ticket. Okay. And that's very disappointing to me.
What about Governor Youngkin?
Haven't talked to him in 8 weeks. And that's also very disappointing to me. I think I had him on my radio program 28 times when he was running for governor. And I certainly advocated for him. You know, I'm frustrated about what happened 2 months ago, but I'm also a mature political.
Why don't you explain what happened 2 months ago?
Long story, but he was given some bad information about a Tumblr account that was supposedly linked to me. We disproved the whole thing, but, you know, he decided that he would take it upon himself to tell me that I had to step aside. I refused. I'm not going to be bullied. This is one reason I think people are going to pick me as lieutenant governor. No one is going to bully me. And I promise you, whether you're the governor of Virginia or whether you are the dog catcher, you are not bullying me. I will treat everybody fairly, and I'll listen to criticisms or concerns, but I've spent a lifetime dealing with issues where I had to have a spine and stand up to people in authority. and I'm going to do it again. And I did it for myself 2 months ago. I'm sure that has offended some people. I mean, hey, so be it. I'm the nominee. I'm a strong conservative Republican, and I will do a good job of representing this party. And anybody who's got a problem with it, needs to deal with their problem and then get on board so that we can win, because there's too much at stake if we don't get unified between now and November.
Have you talked to anyone at the RNC or the Trump campaign?
I have reached out to a bunch of folks, and we've got some good dialogue going on. And I think at this point, with the New Jersey races and the Virginia races, there's a great deal of interest in making sure that we're competitive as we head through the summer into the fall. And, based on the poll numbers you're sharing and the work that I'm doing personally, the shoe leather work, get up in the morning, drive places, go talk to people, stay up late at night, and then repeat it again the next day. I think that the RNC and the other organizations that are a part of the infrastructure of the Republican Party across the country are going to jump on board this campaign.
What about outside groups? I know that America First Policy Institute, Turning Point USA, Scott Pressler, all these guys who are helping people turn out, register. Are they involved in Virginia or your campaign specifically?
I think they will be. Everything kind of got off to an odd start here. So there's a recalibration that's happening. And honestly, I think some people stood back and said, oh, let's see how this plays out. And, these numbers and the evidenced hard work that I'm putting in, I think is going to pay off in the long run.
How much of a factor is money? I mean, you mentioned New Jersey and Virginia. I mean, those are the only two games in town this year. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of money flowing into them, especially if people feel they're competitive, which Virginia clearly is. New Jersey, I think people on the Republican side want to believe that Jack Ciattarelli has a shot. So, but I also think on the flip side, the Dem money is the Soros money is definitely going to fly into Virginia because they feel like it's an opportunity to flip it. So what is... I mean, I got to imagine both you're trying to get it and you're trying to defend against it.
Yeah. Look, there's nothing I can do about the Democrats being as rabid and as power hungry as they are. I mean, they have made it clear. If you go to look at the finance reports for all 6 of the Democrats who are running for lieutenant governor, they're pulling in big money, in some cases over $1 million to run their campaigns. Presumably, they could blow all that on the primary, but I think one of them will get through the primary and they'll probably have money in the bank to start the general immediately. And it's been a slow start for me. And, I'm not an incumbent state senator or an incumbent member of the House of Delegates. I am an outsider seeking this. So I can't call all the developers and all the companies that need my vote and say, hey, will you give me money? Like I suspect all these elected officials are doing. And I'm not rich like Glenn Youngkin, who's got $500 million of his own money in the bank. So I can't write a check just to make things happen the way he did. I'm having to really reach out to people and explain, this is my background, working for Ronald Reagan, working for George Allen, working in the Senate, advocating for President Trump and Republicans all across the Commonwealth. And I'm the guy you want to see in this job. And I think that we're at a place now where people are going to start paying attention. But you're right. It's all about money when it comes to whether you can get on TV, whether you can get on radio, whether you can put the digital ads out there, which is where you move those undecided voters. I got to have that, which gives me a chance to mention, I hope, John Reid for Virginia.com. If anybody's looking to help somebody who's fighting for the outsiders, it's me, John Reid for Virginia.com.
And I believe it's the numeral 4, right? If I remember the website.
It's all spelled out. REID, and it's all spelled out. Yeah. Don't give it to any other website.
wait. But is it FOR or is it? I thought it was 4. Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I was going to give out bad gouge. All right. Thanks for correcting me.
As long as your $100,000 is going to the right place, Sean.
That's I must have. This explains a lot, John Reid. This is why, the contribution didn't come through. Virginia does have unlimited, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a very great state for a candidate because it's unlimited and it can come from out of state. I think the only restriction is foreign money. So, we're in good shape. And I'll be talking to people who are Republicans who are really interested in proving that the Glenn Youngkin and Winsome Sears Jason Miyares win of 4 years ago wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a one-off. There are plenty of conservative people. We may differ on some of the social issues and maybe a couple of the economic issues, but they're people who want reasonable, responsible leadership. They don't want to repeat the violence of 2020, right? Where we saw in Richmond, a lot of people didn't know this, a $250,000 bus set on fire, the police barricaded into the police precinct, and that building set on fire. One of the local museums firebombed, and no one's ever been prosecuted or even arrested for that. I mean, it's shocking to me that these things happened right here. And, even if you're a little left of center, couple that with the forced vaccinations and people losing their jobs and, the governor deciding which businesses stay open and which close. They don't want to repeat that. They want reasonable and responsible leadership. And that's what I offer.
When I turn on the TV right now, and granted, there's 24 hours left before Democrats go to the polls to choose their nominee. Almost every ad is a cookie cutter. I'm going to stand up to President Trump and Elon Musk. Never mind the fact that Elon Musk is no longer in government, but whatever. I feel like their playbook isn't, hey, we're going after Winsome Sears, John Reid, and Jason Miyares. It's we're going to go after Donald Trump and make this entire election a referendum on him.
Yeah, that's their plan. Unfortunately for them, they weren't very smart in the General Assembly session in January and February. They really promoted some outrageous ideas. Everything from day of birth abortion being completely legal without any question.
Day of birth abortion?
The amendment that's going to come before the voters of Virginia allows day of birth abortion. Previously, you had to have 3 doctors, have a situation where they all agreed this needs to happen to save the life of the mother. Now it's one doctor who is the abortionist. I mean, it's the most extreme abortion bill in Virginia, and they're pushing it. Even my friends who are not pro-life, who are very strongly pro-choice, they think that's too far. Like, no, shouldn't be doing that on the day a baby's born. There's no reason for that. That's immoral. And that's the kind of stuff they're pushing. Plus, they didn't learn from the loss of Terry McAuliffe when he said the quiet part out loud about how, the parents are pain and they shouldn't have any role in educating their kids. The Democrats pushed bill after bill after bill, which promoted even as a gay guy, I got to tell you, the trans ideology is insanity. It's not based on biological or factual truth, and it's wrecking the society. And, I never want to hurt people's feelings. I'm not out there to try to bully or harm anybody, but I don't think we should completely throw out the entire organizational structure of the society because for the last, 10 years, some people have said that they think they're the gender that they're not. I mean, I can work with it around the edges, but no, what's happening is crazy. And the Democrats, they're 100% in on it.
Oh, yeah. All right, John Reid, tomorrow you find out who you're up against. I'm sure we'll check back in with you before the end of the election cycle. Good luck out there on the campaign trail, and especially after what happened in Minnesota over the weekend. I wish you and everybody on your campaign to a very safe campaign season.
Yeah, we've got to bring the horrible rhetoric down and be reasonable and responsible, and that's one of the things I want to do.
Yeah, well, hopefully the other side gets that memo because I think that's, these guys between Maxine Waters and Chuck Schumer saying we're going to get you, Gorsuch. I mean, I appreciate how our side is always chastised, but it's their side. I don't mean to sound like a sixth grader, John Reid, but they started it.
It's true. It's true. And we can fix it together. We can fix it. Thank you, Sean.
All right, you bet. All right, guys, thanks for being with us to kick off the Monday. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, Seth Keshel is going to be here. We'll talk about Virginia and every other state, his new voter registration numbers. If you didn't see my newsletter last week, I put them in it. It is worth checking out. Massive trends going in the Republican direction. They're going to help both in Virginia and in New Jersey as we head towards these elections. So you go check that out. Plus, sign up at SeanSpicer.com so you don't miss this great stuff. But Seth Keshel tomorrow. And as I teased, a very special show on Wednesday that you're not going to want to miss. I think this is, I'm excited for it anyway. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.